We're very happy to have Gail Wight back here in Albuquerque as part of this exciting exhibition and to speak about her work. She was last here, I think, in 2006 or 2007. Wight's work investigates the merging of art and science in the broadest possible sense. She questions both the authority and the objectivity put forth by the hard sciences, as she also challenges an empirical view of the world versus a view that is perhaps more fluid and less quantifiable. Gail Wight has been Associate Professor of Art and Art History at Stanford University since 2006. Her work has been written about in many publications, including Art Forum, the Harvard Advocate, the New Art Examiner, Art Papers, and the Los Angeles Times. She has an extensive exhibition record with over a dozen one-person shows throughout North America and Great Britain. And her work can be found in collections in numerous institutions, including the Museum of Modern Art in New York. Her talk today is titled Nature Out of Sight, Out of Mind, and Underfoot. So please join me in welcoming Gail Wight.
Thank you for spending your lunch hour here. It's time to break out those furtive sandwiches. I'm going to start today with this image. This is my painting. No. Oh, I left the title on, Sam. I wanted to start here because I ran into this painting when I was an undergrad in an art history class. And I was thinking about this painting recently and realized that I never really left this moment in this art history class where I had this kind of revelation that there is a long history to this discourse about art and science, culture and science, religion and science. And so this painting, I fell in love with this painting. There are a number of very cool things about this painting. The coolest kind of goth thing is down in the lower part of the frame. There's this skull, and the painting was commissioned for a specific place on a stairwell where you'd kind of wind up. So when you're at a specific spot on those stairs, that skull will snap into perspective, and it will look like this. So how cool is that? That's fantastic. But the stuff that really interests me are the objects on the table. There are these amazing objects there. There's a terrestrial globe and a celestial globe. There's a polyhedral sundial. There's all kinds of sextants. There are lots of navigational instruments here. A globe. It's all about this new way of looking at the world. It's a revival of empiricism at this point in time. And it's also, there's a lute in between the two ambassadors that has a broken string. It's this moment of a rift between church and state or church and science. And as an atheist, I was like, wow, I'm very happy to discover this moment in history. This is an important moment. There are two ambassadors here. One is in clerical dress over on the right. He's kind of in the background, and he takes up, if you look at it mathematically, he takes up about half as much space as the other ambassador who's in this big poofy dress and kind of stepping out into the future. And I really love that about this image. So I realized what I wanted to do was sort of what Holbein was trying to do in this painting, to kind of capture science in my time and address its cultural ramifications, to try to get at what was happening with science in my culture. But before I move into my own work, I'm going to pause here and have a little caveat. There are a bunch of problems with this goal of mine, which is, one, I will never, ever be the painter that Holbein was. I will never be much of a painter at all, in fact. And two, I'm super interested in new models of visual communication, in the kind of stuff of my time. So I'm interested in video and electronics and in responsive objects and those kind of things that are so ubiquitous in our society that they're a great way to communicate. And then third, I just have a perverse and idiotic sense of humor, and there's no way I can keep that out of the work, so it's better to just kind of embrace it and move on from there. So I'm going to show you a few works, kind of jumping back and forth in time, because I've decided to collect them around 4 different topics. They're topics that have kind of come into their own since Holbein made that painting. So the first topic is evolution. This is a piece done in '92 called School of Evolution. I had just started grad school at the San Francisco Art Institute, and I felt kind of out of my element. There wasn't a lot of discussion happening there around this nerdy stuff that I was very interested in. It was a very hip and cool place. It didn't quite fit. So me and the fish spent a lot of time together. I decided to hold a day-long symposium for them. I went to local libraries and collected everything I could find on ichthyology, the study of fish. And in this day-long symposium, I read to them about their bony structures, their gastrointestinal tracts, their reproductive systems, and primarily I focused at the end of the day on evolution and tried to convince them that if they just put their minds to it, they could evolve out of the fish pond like their ancestors had and join the conversation at the Art Institute. So this belongs to the history of long duration pieces. Still working on it. This piece, Zoo Kit, is it's a tribute to Fluxus. So if it has that kind of familiar wooden box look to it, it's a tribute to them. It's 4 racks of test tubes. This first rack contains the DNA for land animals. The next one contains the DNA for sea animals. Jumping over flying animals, and then the flora that would keep all of those animals alive. And then in the center is a test tube filled with the DNA for a zookeeper. So if you wanted to take this and start a zoo somewhere, you kind of got the whole thing right there. Cabinet of Curiosities was playing off the history of natural history museums, those early cabinets. It's a standard old museum cabinet, but the center of it is a touch screen. And this is the image in that touch screen. They're objects that you might find in an old cabinet of curiosities, but I've kind of mixed in a bunch of things from the 20th century. So they're vacuum tubes and medications and computer chips and that kind of thing. As you touch one of those, it brings up a word on the screen that is, again, a kind of concept that's taken on a meaning of its own, post-Darwinian evolution, and then it goes into a kind of video anecdote about that theme. So I'm going to let this video is kind of trying to give you a sense of how that would operate. So I'll run through a few of these on here. Can you hear? Okay. Can you hear it? Can you hear that in the back?
This is strange. Say it again.
Can you hear that, Jen?
It's tear apart.
Cell division. Who knew? So that was about cell division that might actually hurt cells to split and tear apart. This is a little bit of a slot machine having to do with genetics. They're very goofy little anecdotes about all sorts of facets of evolutionary theory at this point in time. And I'm going to let me jump ahead to, this is just a little, this actually, where's the volume on here? Just the first one. Okay, thanks. So this plays a fugue by playing the bones on here. And I'll jump forward to just a little, this is Darwin. So this is called Span. So that last image there is the Darwin that most of us are familiar with. Somebody looked at the picture of him in his 40s or so and said, man, Darwin's middle age was really rough. It's like, oh yeah. Most recently, on the topic of evolution, I made this book as part of a residency at the San Francisco Center for the Book. There's a box, you open up the box, and inside are Darwin's 2 birds, which were actually mockingbirds and not finches. The whole finch thing started in the 50s. It's all a scam. If they glow when you open the cover, they start to glow a little bit. And then the book, in the background, I made this book in 2009, which was Darwin's 200th birthday and 150th birthday of the publication of Origin of the Species. So what I wanted to do was invite Darwin's ghost to go on a walk with me around the San Francisco Bay Area. These are just a few of the pages. I'm sure you can't read that text, but the idea here was that Darwin never made it to North America, and specifically not to the Pacific West Coast, where I wanted to show him, one, the kind of fallout from Darwinian theory, where science had gone around evolutionary theory since he was working. Two, to talk about the kind of environmental degradation and destruction that had happened both in his time and in mine. And then three, to kind of show him the amazing species around the Bay Area that just would have blown his mind. So he was a huge barnacle fan, and he had this passion for carnivorous plants. And so we go around and visit all of these things. The title, Restless Dust, I just wanted to share this. The title comes from this quote, which I just think is an incredibly timeless quote. Mary Wollstonecraft was Mary Shelley's mother, so there's a really lovely kind of resonance in there for me. And then you can't have a book about traveling without having postcards, so we did a trade edition and made these postcards and postcard stamps that Darwin could send, I don't know where, back to the netherworld while we were traveling around the Bay Area. And we agreed to meet up in another 100 years. Okay, so the second topic is experiments and their tools. This is a piece from Ars Electronica in 1999. It's a big maze, and it's about 40 feet long. So here's kind of a dual conversation between the maze as a tool in science, but also the rat who lives in the maze as being a tool of science. Inside this maze are about 50 points in history that I chose that I thought were significant for elucidating how we came to think of ourselves as electrochemical beings. So in case you were losing sleep about that, I think it's this really relevant way of looking at ourselves. So inside are these building blocks and Spike, the rat. And again, there's a little video. And Spike has the freedom in here to actually, doesn't have to learn anything. There are no tricks to do. This is his nest made of shredded EEGs. And there's a little, this actually is a little homage to Plato, who came up with the idea of the brain as seat of the soul, but also came up with the concept of eugenics. And then these are galvanic baths where the Victorians would drop electrodes in their baths to revitalize their life juices. Spike had freedom to kind of chew his way through everything here, rearrange stuff. It was pretty much a non-toxic environment. And then the building blocks described all of these events. This is Pavlov's dog, who would howl when Spike went by. This is electroshock therapy. There's experiments on the giant squid axon in the background. These are cat vision experiments, but I believe Spike has eaten the cats. There's an electron microscope. He's sitting on a sheet of LSD right there. These are transgenic tomatoes. And then there's an electric paresis bench here where you can shock a cell to shoot DNA into it. And essentially, it was just by the end of the exhibit at Ars Electronica, it was trashed, which made me so happy. It was really kind of a cathartic experience. It did make me want to work with living animals again. So in 2003, I did this piece called Rodentia violoncello. Actually, there's a side story to this. This was done for the Lincoln Center in New York for their summer festival, and Mary Songas had a piece there too. And it just happened as I was landing at my plane, the whole eastern seaboard's electricity went out. And so fortunately, Mary's piece ran on solar power. My piece ran on batteries, so we made it through the festival. Woo! But there was no electricity. In this piece, I've taken apart a cello and rebuilt it in plexiglass and filled it with mice, 5 mice. And again, they kind of have, it's their environment. They have their free reign to do whatever they'd like. This is a whisker switch made with cello wire, and if a mouse holds on to that little wire or steps on it or whatever, it'll trip this micro switch and play a little cello phrase. So what actually happens in here is the audience would build up waiting for these mice to do, they're nocturnal, they're sleeping, they're hanging out, they nudge each other, maybe they wake each other up. But, once every half an hour in the good moments, maybe every hour, they'd hit a cello phrase or two and then go back to sleep. So it's really more about training the audience than it was about training the mice. And that was so much fun. I went on and made Rodentia Chamber Orchestra, which was a whole suite of instruments. inside of them, their sensors kind of resonated with whatever they were. So pianos had keys that were leaf switches. The carillon, if they ran on their wheels, it would ring bells. The harp, as they ran up and down the harp, it would play harp phrases. And the cello, the whisker switch. And the drum was my one homage to punk because that had piezo sensors. So when they step on those, it picks up vibrations, and that would do it like, which was a perfect accompaniment to all this classical music. So I'll play a little bit, and then of course they all played at once. There was a choice of whether to have one channel cut the other one out, but it was much better to have it be a cacophony. So I've turned my sound off here. I want to turn it up here. Which way am I going? So that way? Thank you. Okay, so I'll just play a few little. Can you hear that? No, okay, watch the mic. No, I'm sorry, you can't hear it. It's just noise. It's, a little bit of bells and some cello and I can't sing this one like I can do the noise. Just take my word for it. A little yo-yo ma, some bells, some cacophony. But of course, they can't stay up through a whole exhibit. So they're there for an opening. They go to sleep. They do nothing, and then they go home. These mice actually all went home with staff from the museum, and then a video is left on the music stand of the performance. Meaning of minuscule, also a instrument of science, giant microscope. This was done with a grant from a place called the Center for Probing the Nanoscale, which is a place doing nanoscopy at Stanford. But truth be told, it just woke up in the morning one day and was like, I want to build a 7-foot microscope. So it was kind of So I built it out of foam core and then ended up building this one out of plexiglass. What happens here is, actually, let me back up. There's a slide on the stage, and that slide will show you images from the history of microscopy. The grant was actually to talk about ethics in science. So this is 9 of 18 databases, and it starts out in the era of Lowenhoek, moves into the 30s and 40s in the middle there, and then the second half of the 20th and early 21st century is all done by clumping topics together. So there are diatoms and viruses and plant materials and crystals, and then the last databases deal with nanoscopy. And those are, within each database there are tens, so between 10 and 40 images or so. So as you roll that one focus knob, you're moving through time, and it shows up on this screen. But what you get is kind of a slot machine effect. The other focus knob, however, is taking you through a narrative that I've edited from science radio. Can you hear that? Yeah, okay, good. So I've edited this from science radio, and I've taken snippets that are kind of almost inane, like they could apply to anything. So let me jump ahead. Oh, yeah, we're there.
Depending on the way the atoms are arranged with respect.
The actual change in temperature.
The bacteria don't know whether they're making electricity or hydrogen. They're just eating and degrading organic matter and growing new bacteria.
These cells can be coaxed into becoming any different type of tissue in the whole of the human body because that's what they do.
This is a bit like a plug and a plug socket, and the cells literally plug themselves into the cell next door.
So the absence is just as important as the presence of things.
So the idea there is, the absence of something is as important as the presence, or these cells could be coaxed into becoming anything in the human body. You kind of have this slot machine mix and match, and you may not be aware at first, hopefully, that the narrative doesn't quite fit what you're looking at, but eventually it becomes apparent that the narrative is falling apart. The idea here is that we're completely reliant on scientists to tell us the truth, or their truth, or as much as they know, about things that are outside of our own perception. So there's no way for me to look at an image done at the level of nanoparticles and know what I'm looking at. There's no way. Someone else who has experience in that field has to tell me, and then I have to trust them. So there's an odd leap of faith that happens inside science itself at this point. And then most recently, again, thinking about the tools of science as being not just the machines, but also the chemicals and the animals that are involved as tools of science. This is an experiment done in 1946. I know exactly what you're looking at on the web by your your acknowledgement of whether or not you've run across this before. These are experiments in which these spiders were fed all kinds of pharmaceuticals and then left to spin webs. And the results kind of say as much about us as they do about spiders. So here's a normal web: marijuana, caffeine, benzodrine on the left-hand side. And then on the right-hand side, I redid these experiments, drawing these on vellum using a magnifying glass out in the sun. So I burned away the drawing, and it left just a trace. There is a really strange amount of resonance looking at, say, caffeine or benzodrine, which is a type of speed, thinking, oh yeah, that's exactly how I feel after I have a cup of coffee, which we don't usually associate spiders as being our most kind of resonant lab animal. So I ended up doing the whole set. This is the whole set that was done in 46. Oh yeah. Yeah, pick your favorite. And it's hard to see here, but they are burned away, and I can't really control my speed out in the sun with a magnifying glass. And so what happens is little holes get burned through here, and I've tried to approximate this for you in a slide. So this one is mescaline, and if each one of these little spots is a hole through the paper, which is already translucent. And if you hold it up to the sun, what happens is, and this is a kind of a crappy approximation, but you see the sun sort of sparkling through there, and it looks like dew on a web, remarkably like dew on a web. So those drawings were about this size, whatever that is, 16 by 20, roughly. I just finished remaking this and installing it in June at the UC Botanical Gardens. This is the arid house, where a lot of plants that exude those psychopharmaceuticals live. And then in the windows, these are the very big drawings. Here. So that's one web, and those are 3 feet by 4 feet. And I framed them so that they hopefully kind of fit into the greenhouse in a way that's inobtrusive. You may not notice them when you walk in. And again, it's hard to see, but especially as you're moving through the greenhouse, the sky behind there really sparkles through them, and you get this nice effect of like sunlight sparkling through those little holes in the web. And then there's also this nice interplay of just shadows from things in the greenhouse and that sort of thing. So that was a lot of fun, and I'm blind now. It's really a thing. I, go out in a hoodie with gloves and glasses, and felt like I was welding or something out in the sun. Topic of collections. This is a kind of quintessential collection, a collection of butterflies, but this is kind of writ large. These butterflies they have wingspans of 36 to 44 inches, somewhere in there, so they're fairly big. And everything is scaled up, so the pins that pin them to the wall are 18 inches long. And then they're running on these little timers, very, very slow periodicity, in which they try to escape off the wall. But when they do that, because they're big, it's kind of horrific. They do this thing trying to get off the wall. So, ground plane is from a collection at Stanford in the lab of Liz Hadley. I had started conversations with her. She's very interested in, she's a paleontologist, so she deals with very, very old things. And she's looking at climate change in the past. So this particular collection that I looked at, these are big prints, and these are a better view so you can get an idea of what those prints look like. They're 44 inches square. They're comprised of little tiny bones from her collection that are between 1 and 10,000 years old. So that doesn't sound that long, but I'll bet there's some people like me in here. They're like, "What'd you do last Thursday?" Gotcha. Thinking 1,000 years ago or 5,000 years ago, forget it. It's just so beyond my personal comprehension or anything that I feel like I can internalize. And I really wanted to get this thing that she thinks about so fluidly, deep time. And it also seemed important to me in terms of this discourse about evolution, right? It did not all start. Dinosaurs did not share the planet with Jesus. So I really wanted to, there's a museum out there that claims so. This is her lab, and this is what her collection looks like. So each one of those little bones has a catalog number and is its own little box. And that drawer is that's the size of a bone, so you can tell from my fingers. And they're printed 1-to-1 in those assemblages. So that's the size of a bone. And then that drawer is one of hundreds in her lab. So I spent 2 to 3 months while she was on sabbatical. She unbelievably just handed me the keys to her lab and said, "Go to town." So I photographed all those bones, one at a time, and then put it back. And then took the next one out and photographed it, and then put it back. And when I had close to 1,000, I was not disciplined enough to get to 1,000, which is just one of those shameful things. But when I had close to 1,000, I was like, okay, I've had enough. I went back to my lab, and I was trying to think in my studio, how do I take all this stuff and think about time? And these two structures came to mind, mandalas and snowflakes, as being things that are kind of ephemeral. They have this crystalline structure, they have a very organized structure, and yet they're very ephemeral. They are not to last in this world. They are about kind of organizing the universe in a way. So I used those as kind of templates for organizing these bones. So that's just one of the constructions. And then every now and then I would throw something odd in. So that clump in the middle is a snake. It's all the bones to make a snake, but it hasn't been assembled or separated out yet. So that's the whole set. In a similar manner, I went to Stonehenge and went through their archives. I was invited to go hang out there, and I could either hang out with the archaeologists or hang out in the archives, and the archives were amazing. And in this very British way, they handed me the keys and said, "We'll be back at tea." So it was great. I was alone in these archives, and these were not organized like Liz Hadley's lab. These were like total chaos. And it's hundreds of years of amazing things that they've dug up either right around Stonehenge or in the neighborhood around Stonehenge. It's incredible stuff. It's primarily hand tools. So I'm sitting in the Science Museum there. Okay, I wondered if I threw this in. I did. This is me going crazy in the Science Museum, locked in the archives between tea time and tea time. That's a woolly mammoth molar. I'm trying to give you a compare and contrast. That's one molar. So imagine what they look like when they smile. So I'm in the Science Museum, which has kind of plain leaded glass windows, and across the street is the Salisbury Cathedral, which has these crazy, beautiful windows. This comes to mind. So I wanted to talk somehow about, all of the talk about Stonehenge is about its kind of mystical origins and its proto-religious meanings and stuff. And I just wanted to talk about how cool is that they built that thing. And that's sort of what the archaeologists were after, like how'd they get those stones from here to there? They're looking at very pragmatic stuff. Where did the boat land? How far did they drag that rock? How did they get that rock from here to there? I was just amazed at holding these stone tools and realizing this fits my hand. I could do stuff with this. It was just kind of incredible to me. So I made this kind of crazy Victorian extravaganza, kind of riffing off the Salisbury Cathedral windows. This is a print that's 10 feet long. So when you stand next to it, the skull is pretty much human-sized, and the stone tools are pretty much 1-to-1. So it's actually bigger than you're seeing it here. And I was just really amazed. There are bone needles and tiny little arrow points and, fine things. And you could see, I brought a microscope to photograph a lot of this stuff, and you can see little chips, carefully done flakes, beautifully done stuff. There's a lot of trading and tools and stuff like that. Not far from Home Depot. So, okay, so the last sort of topic that I wanted to address here is the environment. And thinking about, outside and our relationship to the natural world or the physical world that we live in and our place in it. This first piece, Center of Gravity, I guess maybe these pieces are, I heard my voice drop. Maybe these pieces are a little bit more serious for me because I feel like we are definitely in a crisis. Center of Gravity is a piece where it started when I was going up to the North Coast in California to a couple of beaches up there that I really love, and realizing there's some underwater preserves and amazing tide pools, and they're changing. There weren't jellyfish there years ago. Now it's crowded with jellyfish. So I realized, the water's getting warmer. The population is really changing there. I don't see as many of these bright red starfish as I used to see, that kind of thing. And then back home on the East Coast, same thing. I see the shoreline changing. So I started going through my photographs of beautiful places that I have visited in my life and really love for the kind of natural beauty of them, and then turning them into core samples to kind of take my present and turn it into a past. So I wanted to sort of make this underground world, like my present is becoming the past much faster than I realized. It's becoming the past within my own lifetime. So they're photographs that flip, so they're continuous around these tubes. The tubes are, they're 8 feet long, and they're lit from within. So as you walk through them, there are sensors that trigger your movement and will play sounds from those environments. But the sounds are not just natural sounds, they're also man-made sounds. So in the desert out here, you'll hear coyotes, but you also hear motorcycles. Up on the... There you go. Let's let this play. Nobody likes the sound of a jet engine. So up on the Pacific North Coast, you'd hear lumber trucks all night long, but you'd also hear harbor seals and that kind of thing. So it's kind of mixing the kind of voices of that past and how that's happening. Anyhow, a murky video. Sorry about that. Okay, so the piece here is based on slime mold, and I've done a number of pieces with slime mold, probably about 6 pieces now since the early 90s. And this is the most fun and favorite so far. This is slime mold, which I've done. So now I have like how many years is that? 15-year relationship with slime mold. I'm a slime mold junkie. I really love it. It grows wild in Northern California. So this is it in sort of a distressed state, and this is it in its full glory. This is in my backyard flipping over a plank. And it's just really stunning stuff. And again, it has a lot of resonance for us because it looks plant-like or cell-like, or it looks like the brain. It has all these kind of beautiful things. So in the piece just prior to this, I had tried growing it on tinted agar. It will grow on agar, which is a growth medium made of seaweed. And here I have tinted that agar with watercolor dyes. And then it likes oatmeal, so you can kind of coax it to go in different directions by dropping oatmeal down. And then this is a little nursery in my studio. In this video here, every 3 hours is 3 minutes. I just want to tell you about my pain of working with slime mold for a second. First of all, it's badly behaved. Here it is trying to get out. I've found it all kinds of crazy places in my car, in the stairs of my house. It's really gooey. It's the inspiration for the 1950s movie The Blob, if you're a film buff. And it's going to come out of the screen. I was going to tell you about my pain. That's what I was going to do. So every 3 hours is 3 minutes of finished video. And then, I put the oatmeal here, and this piece was done for the first time I used a microscopic camera. So these are anywhere from 40 to 100 times magnification. And that means, I really only have this much video real estate before the thing is out of my lens. So the camera's here and the slime mold's growing here, and if it goes that way, instead of, under the lens, I'm sunk. And I don't know that for 3 hours. So I had this summer in which, at 8 in the morning, I'd check the camera, set it up, look at the footage, and then at 11, and then at 2, and then at 5, and then at 8, and then at 11, I would go to bed, and then I would set my alarm for 2, and I'd set my alarm for 5, and I would go out to my studio and check the footage and move the camera because, inevitably it would go the wrong way, and there was no way to get all the footage I needed by the end of the summer unless I lived slime mold time. So there's a lot of kind of incredible lost footage and weird stuff that happened. A spider got in one time, it's like tromping around in there. Cool footage, but not really working for the piece. So, and I don't need to show this to you because this is here. Okay, so I'm going to end with a work in progress. So nothing more suicidal than starting a talk with a Holbein painting. The second most suicidal thing is to end a talk with a work in progress that may not work out. I recently was thinking about Joseph Albers. I don't know, I just kind of remembered a teacher in high school who was trying to tell me that not all grays were the same when I was learning how to do photography. So she got out this box and pulled out these folios and she put on gloves. And I'd just never seen anybody put on gloves to touch a book before. I'd never, seen anybody, take out pages that were not sewn together and lay them out. And I just thought it was an amazing thing. And I was wondering, what is that? What was that book? It was the interaction of color, which has been on my bookshelf, almost my whole adult life. But I don't have the good copy. I've got, fifth or sixth remake down the line, which is just a book. So I realized, there's this original copy he made that's these folios that you take out and you play with. So I thought I would like to take Albers' idea. So what happens is his ideas are about color in context. So on the right, you take that sheet and it has little holes in it, and you hold it over the sheet on the left, and you see that these two squares, which look totally different here, are actually the same color. But they don't look the same color because you're not seeing them in context. You're seeing them with other colors around them that radically change the way your eye perceives them. So I thought what I want to do is completely redo the interaction of color about the environment. What is it that we don't get, or I don't get, when I go outside? I know that I don't know my trees well. You know what I mean? Never mind grass, which I spend a lot more time on than under trees. I don't know my built environment well. I don't know my natural environment well. So how can I take his ideas about context and take them outside and kind of think about the world in that way? This is Albers. When I started thinking about that, Stanford has this book. So they have photographed the whole thing for me. And I only got my hands on all those files recently. So in the meantime, I went on this Albers Reverie. He did hundreds of these. And so this is where I started with this project, Homage to the Square, in which he just laid one color on top of another color on top of another color, initially testing his ideas about context and color. So I'm really drawn to this kind of thing where there are 4 colors there, but you don't really see them at all. Or here, there are 4, but you kind of only see 3. What are those really subtle spaces? So that's where I've kind of started with this. And of course, I've started with video, because again, I will never be a painter. Though I really think painting holds the primary place, and I would love to be one. So this is a sky. I'm gonna jump ahead into, this is the most banal one I've made so far. This is dawn, and it does nothing for 5 minutes. I'm gonna fast forward so you can see just the center square eventually gets brighter. Oops, okay. So here it is. Just the center square eventually gets brighter as the sun rises. But they are 4 shots of dawn just laid on top of each other. And the response to that so far has been, wow, that is so boring. You don't really expect people to watch that, do you? So I've been playing around with doing this sort of thing, and as you watch this, there are moments where corners disappear, or it seems to jitter in its color or jump from one color to the next. But if you watch the individual videos, they're completely smooth, and so it really is the context of one piece of sky on top of another piece of the sky that makes you perceive it differently or begin to see things that may or may not be there. And then, let me see, there are one other, I will show you this. I've been playing around with just all kinds of stuff out in the world. So this is one field of grass, shot close up, far away, as the clouds pass over, and then here's seaweed on a beach, drying in the sun, and up close this thing is alive with flies. And then, of course, when you're shooting video, you're looking at this and then a screen like this, and the world is out there, but it's far away. So a lot of stuff I don't see until I get back to my studio. Like in this one, there was just so much stuff happening in the frame, and I had no idea it was there until I got back to my studio. So there are odd things. I kind of like how the horizon line disappeared in this one. But these are all experiments at this point. So who knows? So far that they are keeping me highly entertained. But this is another seaweed, and then finally trees. And this one, I had to watch the original footage over and over because this one, it looks like my tripod isn't steady, but then I realized, that can't, I watched the original footage and it seems fine, but a tripod would jitter. And this was actually a huge tree that was just moving like this in the wind. Very weird. And I was amazed by it in person when I shot it, but then in context with the other trees, it just seems like that's an impossible movement for a tree to make. So I'm hoping that somewhere in these experiments are ways to kind of rethink the way we look at the world. Okay, so that is it from me.